Hi everyone. So the book I chose for my read aloud in my classroom is Why We Can't Wait by Martin Luther King Jr. I chose it for a few reasons. The first, it gives us a different perspective on racism in America, specifically in the 1960s and 1970s, which is something we were not around for, nor will our students have been around for, so I think it's important that we take a different perspective and lens for it. The second reason being, this book does a great job of showing us how change can be made through peaceful protest. Martin Luther King was all about that, and this book does a great job of showing how that progressed through what they were going through during that time. Here's the cover of the book with Martin Luther King on the front. We're now going to read a little bit. Here we go. Chapter 1, The Negro Revolution and Why 1963. The bitterly cold winter of 1962 lingered throughout the opening months of 1963. Touching the land with chill and frost, and then was replaced by a placid spring. Americans awaited a quiet summer. That it would be pleasant, they had no doubt. The worst of it would be the nightmare created by 60 million cars, all apparently trying to reach the same destination at the same time. 50 million families looking forward to the pleasure of 200 million vacations in the American tradition of the frantic hunt for relaxation. It would be a pleasant summer because in the mind of the average man, there was little cause for concern. The blithe outlook about the state of the nation was reflected from as high up as the White House. The administration confidently readied a tax reduction bill. Business and employment were at comfortable levels. Money was for many Americans plentiful. Summer came and the weather was beautiful, but the social climate of America life erupted into lightning flashes, trembled with thunder, and vibrated to the relentless growing rain of protest come to life through the land. Explosively, America's third revolution, the Negro Revolution, had begun. For the first time in the long, turbulent history of the nation, almost 1,000 cities were engulfed in civil turmoil. With violence trembling just below the surface, reminiscent of the French Revolution of 1789, the streets should become a battleground, just as they had become the battleground in the 1830s of England's march against Chartists. As in these two revolutions, a submerged social group propelled by a burning need for justice, lifting itself with sudden swiftness, moving with determination and a majestic scorn for risk and danger, created an uprising so powerful that it shook a huge society from its comfortable base. Never in American history had a group seized the streets, the squares, and all the businesses throughout the marbled halls of government to protest and proclaim the undurability of their oppression. Had room-sized machines turned human, burst from the plants that housed them, and stalked the land in revolt, the nation could not have been more amazed. Undeniably, the Negro had been an object of sympathy and wore the scars of deep grievances, but the nation had come to count on him as a creature who could quietly endure, silently suffer, and patiently wait. He was well trained in service, and whatever the provocation, he neither pushed back nor spoke back. So that was just a little bit of the first chapter. The website I chose was africa.upenn.edu. It has the letter of Birmingham posted, letter from a Birmingham jail, and this was the letter that Martin Luther King Jr. wrote when he was in jail during the time of the 1960s when he had done no wrong, but he was jailed because he was exercising his right to speak, but realized that he wasn't given a right. So he wrote this letter from a jail cell, and it was very powerful. And it's in the book, but it's not closer till the end. And the reason why I did want to pull that out on the website was because it gives us a different context of what a letter can do for communication. You know, nowadays we use texting and emails and calling, but back then, you know, when you wanted to communicate something to people, you would write a letter, you know, with words, you know, very powerful words. It also gives us Martin Luther King's perspective on racism and where he stands. You know, nobody's perfect, but being able to understand where someone comes from and understand what they've been through gives us a different lens and helps us understand certain subjects and situations that we might not have experience with. And then it also shows us the reason why I wanted to get the letter away from the book is because we can kind of confuse the book and the letter, which there's nothing wrong with, you know, reading them both at the same time, but, you know, being able to separately look at the letter and break it down and try to understand it better is something that I think would be beneficial for my classroom. And then my three content standards that I ended up choosing were historical events provide opportunities to examine alternate courses of action. You know, we can look at what might have happened if the protests wouldn't have been peaceful, if they would have been violent, what could have occurred then. We could look at that kind of stuff and see, what different routes could have been chosen. The second one is following Reconstruction of the U.S., old political and social structures immersed in racial discrimination was institutionalized, because Abraham Lincoln had abolished slavery with the 13th Amendment, but it had gotten picked back up later on, and it's something that we, even after we had those amendments put in place, we still were bad at as a country and a nation. And the third one is the use of primary and secondary sources of information include an examination of the credibility of each source. So, we can look at Martin Luther King in his book, and we can compare it to other books and see, if it's credible, if he's right. And then we can look at his letter too and compare it to other sources and see if it lines up with what was going on during that time. So that was the book I chose, is Why We Can't Wait by Martin Luther King Jr. I hope you enjoyed.